In this video, we'll look at why it's often better to close a limited company using a licensed insolvency practitioner. Two of the main ways to close a limited company are to pay a licensed insolvency practitioner to liquidate the company or to dissolve the company yourself. If you're unsure of the difference between liquidating and dissolving a limited company, just use the links below to have a look at our YouTube video and that'll explain the difference for you. There are pros and cons to both methods, but generally, if your company owes money and you want to close it, you should liquidate it. If your company has no debt and you want to close it, you can dissolve it. On the face of it, paying a licensed insolvency practitioner to liquidate your limited company might look like an expensive option, but in the next few minutes we'll show you how this is very often the best thing for you to do, both legally and actually financially for you. To show the difference between dissolving and liquidating a company, we're going to use two small limited companies which are both set up in a very typical manner, in that both are owned and run by a husband and wife team, with both the husband and wife being directors. Both companies have traded successfully for 9 years, with both husband and wife taking some salary via the company's PAYE system. In a situation like this, directors typically pay themselves approximately £730 a month, although for this example, it doesn't matter if it's less. Let's assume something outside their control, such as COVID, has caused both companies to run into financial difficulties, and it's become clear that they don't have enough income to pay their bills, and they're beginning to build up debt. Doesn't matter what these debts are. They could be, corporation tax, a VAT bill, a bounce back loan, rent arrears, money owed to suppliers. Yep, doesn't matter at all. But the fact is that they've built up this debt and they don't have the income to pay back the debt, and this means that both of the companies are insolvent. To make this simple, let's assume that both companies have just two creditors. Firstly, a tax bill of £5,000, and secondly, they owe £5,000 rent arrears, so in total, they have debts of £10,000. The first two directors of the first company decide that what they want to do is dissolve their company, and they decide to do it by paying a £10 fee on the company's house website. If you look below this video, there's a link to another video which will explain a little bit more about dissolving a company on the company's house website. Directors of the second company decide to pay a licensed insolvency practitioner to liquidate their company. Now let's have a look at a bit more detail at what numbers are involved. Let's have a look at the specific numbers for the first company. Oh, hello Mr. and Mrs. First Company. Now then, they'd spoken to a bloke down the pub who told them it was dead easy to dissolve their company for only £10 using a simple form via company's house, and that they didn't really need to worry too much about any other details. The thing is, what the bloke down the pub didn't tell them was that it's illegal to dissolve a company without informing all the people the company owes money to that you're closing your company. But this is exactly what they did, because they didn't tell the landlord or the taxman that they were dissolving their company. Oh dear. Let's have a look at the consequences, should we? Number one is that by closing their company and not informing the company's creditors, they've broken the law. Whether they knew this or not, there's no way of getting around this. It's fraud. Secondly, by closing the company themselves and not using a licensed insolvency practitioner, it means that they can't make a claim for a director's redundancy payment. If you know about director's redundancy payments, you'll understand how important this might be. If you don't know anything about director's redundancy payments, just use the link below to go to another of our explainer videos to learn a little bit more about them. Thirdly, it's almost certain that the company's creditors, and that's the landlord and the taxman, will at some point find out that the company was closed down while still owing them money, and they will not be impressed. And this is almost guaranteed in the case of the taxman, as the various government institutions can share information. And this leads on to point 4. these creditors can now petition to have the company reinstated so that they can attempt to recover the money owing to them. And this now also opens up the potential for the directors to become personally pursued for this debt. Anyway, on a plus side, it is fair to point out that the directors are pretty chuffed in the fact that they only spent £10 on getting themselves into this mess. Now let's look at the second company. Here come Mr. and Mrs. Second Company. Now remember, we're assuming the second company's circumstances were exactly the same as the first company's, in that they've traded successfully and paid themselves via PAYE for 9 years, but they've now got into financial difficulties and they've built up debts totalling £10,000. It's just the same as the first company. The difference is that these directors decided to take professional advice rather than just talk to the bloke down the pub. So they decided to talk to a licensed insolvency practitioner, just like Adcroft Hilton. After carefully looking into the company's financial situation and assessing all the options, Adcroft Hilton advised that closing the company by liquidating it would be the best option for everybody involved. Adcroft Hilton quoted £6,000 to liquidate the company, and they suggested that the directors speak to an independent FCA regulator advisor who'd be able to assess if they might be able to make a claim for a director's redundancy payment. Mr. and Mrs. Second Company took this advice. They spoke to the independent advisor, who confirmed that indeed both of them would be eligible to make a claim, and the advisor also calculated what the claim would be. Whilst it is possible to submit a claim yourself, Mr. and Mrs. Second Company decided that they would prefer to pay the FCA regulated advisor a fee to submit the claim on their behalf. Then they'd know that the claim was submitted correctly and that they would receive all the funds they were eligible for. Once again, look at the links below to find out more about director redundancy claims if you don't know anything about them. After considering their options, Mr. and Mrs. Second Company decided to appoint Adcroft Hilton to liquidate their company. Once appointed, all the administration of the liquidation was handled by Adcroft Hilton, who were also informed and dealt with all the creditors via the formal liquidation process, and the company was finally closed, completely legally and with no further comeback for the directors. Not bad, eh? Okay, let's sum up. Although maybe without knowing, the directors of the first company broke the law, and with all the potential circumstances that this might bring. They still had £10,000 of debt hanging over them, but they felt pleased they'd only had to pay £10 to get into this situation. The directors of the second company took professional advice. They did everything within the letter of the law, they didn't pay any money at all up front, and they no longer had any debts overhanging them. Now you may think this example is unbelievable, or possibly too good to be true, but honestly, it's not. The directors of the first company spent £10 and they broke the law, and they didn't even get rid of their debts. Whilst on the other hand, the directors of the second company didn't spend anything, they didn't break the law, they didn't still have any potential debts. Think about it. Which of these directors would you prefer to be? It's not a hard question. Obviously, everyone's circumstances are different. But this is why talking to a licensed insolvency practitioner like Adcroft Hilton is crucial. You can talk to us in complete confidence, and we promise to be friendly and supportive. Our initial advice is completely free, and you'll be under no obligation to progress with anything at all. If nothing else, you'll have more information, and more information always leads to better decision making. You'll find our contact details on the video now, and there'll also be links below the video for you to click through to.